So hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Prem Gill. I'm the CEO of Creative BC, and I'm very excited for our Greet10x panel. Long story why we call it 10x, but just go with us on that one. I'm here with my colleague, Kat Yee from the Film Commission here at Creative BC. You'll meet Kat in a moment, and also want to welcome Jeff Holloway and Megan Props, who you're going to hear many inspiring comments from today. Before we get started, we want to tell you a little bit about Creative Pathways, and Kat's going to get into that. Really want to thank all of you who are tuned into this. I know it's probably lunch hour for many of you. We've only got till 1 o'clock. We're going to get a lot of interesting discussion in there. Just for your information, today I am on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. If anybody wants to share, I invite you to share the territories you're tuning in from in the chat or the Q&A. We will be monitoring the Q&A as we go along. I'll either ask questions at the end or during the presentation. It'll all be very fluid. So thank you again and welcome. And I am going to hand it over to Kat to give us a little overview of Creative Pathways, what it is, why it's important to us, and for the film industry here in British Columbia. Over to you, Kat.
That Prem. Hopefully you can all hear me without too much echo. So Creative Pathways was initiated this past month. We're really excited to have it on live and actually available for all of you to access. Some of you may or may not have already seen it before. And if you haven't yet, it's at creativepathwayscanada.com. So the whole impetus behind Creative Pathways is to enable us to build a workforce that is equitable, diverse, and inclusive. And if you visit our hub, you'll find incredible things like events like our Greet10x's that we have today. We're very fortunate again to have that on. But also really importantly, you can explore 39 different careers and over 300 different jobs that are available in the motion picture industry. Everything from, hey, how do I work in props like Megan Props, to, hey, how do I work in a film adjacent career just like Jeff? So it's a really great resource. And without further ado, I really want to just give this time to our speakers today to also speak about how they got into the film industry and get to the panel. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Kat. And we'll have slides up at the end on how you can get in touch with us if you're interested in learning more about Creative Pathways. So yeah, let's dive into it. We have two really interesting experienced people here who are here to share their paths into the industry and their experiences. And I'm going to start with you, Jeff. You are the Chief Steward for ACFC. So maybe you can tell us what does that mean? What is ACFC an acronym for? Knowing that there's some folks who might be on this call who have no idea, and really our goal is to help people understand what different jobs are and what you do. So go ahead, Jeff.
Sure. Okay. So ACFC stands for, I never have to answer this, but I think it's the Association of Canadian Film Craftspeople. We're about 1,000 members strong and probably have about another 2,000 or so permittees on our roster. We cover mostly the sort of trade end of filmmaking, grips, electrics, craft services, some office work, props, set deck, drivers. We have a very big roster of positions, categories we call them in our contract. My job there is kind of the liaison between producers and crew. I'm spend a lot of my time kind of interpreting the contract. You know, the 6 unions have pretty big contracts that everybody works under, and they're not the easiest documents to navigate. And of course, they're not always 100% right. So a big part of my job is looking at different situations and seeing how the contract applies. And I deal with bullying and harassment. I deal with safety, a lot of stuff like that. So a lot of board work on the ACFC board, which is the advisory body for WorkSafe that looks out for the entertainment industry. Everything from live music, theater, and film is a huge part of that. I work on call time mental health because it's a super important part and something that's often overlooked in the film business, or has been for years, and so we're trying to change that. And it's I got to say, a very rewarding job. I've been in the film business pretty steady for about 20 years. You know, like once you start, I think everybody here will know that it takes a little bit of time to really get your ball up and rolling. So I'd say full time for 14, 15 years, or since I haven't done anything but film, but had a lot of kind of weird jobs in between. And I've done a ton of jobs in film to get me to where I am, all over the map. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. And we're going to get more into that because I have many questions for you, and also for people to understand, what are permittees and how does that whole process work. So we'll get into that, and also some of the jobs that led you to where you are. Megan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Megan Harris. I go by Megan Props on social media. I moved to Vancouver. I was 19 years old by myself. I didn't really know what I was doing, and I found myself being a nanny, having a pretty intense job. So I started working 12 hours, like right off the bat. Met a lot of people and got asked to do background one day, which I was like, okay, interesting. I did a few days in background, got sort of realized that there's an industry here for that. And then I, meeting friends again, and I got asked to do a PA day, a shift as a production assistant, which ended up being 13 hours of like digging plywood out of the mud. And they said, let's start her off good. And if she can do it, she'll probably come on the next day. And just like that, I was doing like 5 days a week as a production assistant on different shows. I started on Supernatural, with a lot of IATSE shows at the start. And then I did full-time on Firefly Lane season 1. That's when I was jumping around in the locations department. I was an office runner for the first 2 months of Firefly Lane. And then I went to a prep lead at a big house in West Van, and I spent a lot of my time there. And that's actually that's where I connected into the props department. The props person on Firefly Lane posted up one day needing to replace himself. And then I got myself an interview, got myself in there. And then that's when I started in the ACFC world, working on Hallmarks and all those shows. And yeah, that's how I sort of got there.
That's a lot in not a big period of time as well, Megan. So
yes, I did that all. I guess within 2 years, I made my way into the props department and got my firearms license and did all my courses, my MPIO, everything. And I only knew all these things through going and being a production assistant. I would have had no idea, like genuinely no idea. That's like was my foot in the door. And then if you want to keep walking, you can.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And so, Jeff, I want to kind of bring it back to you on this, because I think you started out sort of doing PA type of roles as well. But I also really want to break it down for folks who are tuning in, because what is the MPIO course and why is that necessary? Which one of you would you like to answer that, Jeff, on how that works?
I can, yeah.
Entry, yeah.
I will tell you, I've never taken the MPIO course. But it is essentially a primer for film. My understanding of it, I should probably audit it one day just so I know more what I'm talking about. But my understanding is it's a primer. You learn kind of the hierarchy of film. You learn what different positions do. You learn some radio etiquette, some paperwork etiquette. Megan, maybe you've done it and I haven't. You may be better.
Yeah, I did do it, but I went in, and because I had worked as a PA for even I think I did a year after being a PA, just because I needed the course to apply for IATSE and such. I knew every answer. It was very you go in that course and you're learning the basics. But if you haven't done a day on set, I think it's really important. It's either, but I mean, having it firsthand and you're going to get better at it once it's in your lap at work for sure.
And the reason I am asking about it, in case there's people who are watching this, Kat's just posted a link to the course. If you're even trying to, looking to explore, a lot of the things that you're speaking to are not necessarily things that you always learn, in different types of courses, especially if you're trying to learn a specific craft. But being on set is a very different thing, and actually in production than theoretically what's happening.
I will say one thing to note is the reason I've never done it is when I joined ACFC, and I also have joined IATSE as well. I've had a certain number of days in the film industry. So, for example, we require it for membership unless you have 60 days paid in the industry, and then we'll waive the requirement for that at ACFC. I'm sure there is something like that in IA too, and probably DGC, and if you've been around, it's really just to make sure that you have a good understanding of how communications work and how to behave on set, so that you're not messing anything up for yourself or for anyone else. And if you've been on set, it's really not necessary.
Yeah.
And it stands for motion motion picture introduction orientation course.
Right.
If anyone was wondering, it's really just the introduction to being on set.
Yeah. Hugely valuable if you've never been on set.
Hmm.
Jeff, can you sort of just quickly talk to us about that journey to, okay, I've tuned into this webinar, I went into the MPIO course, maybe I studied something related to one of the departments in film. Creative Pathways is, again, a great resource to understand what different departments are. And I'm interested in applying to ACFC, or, there's other film unions in Vancouver as well, or IATSE. How does that, I think the general starting process is very similar. So would you mind sharing some intel on how that works?
Sure, I'll start kind of with us. We have a shorter list of requirements than I think IA does, specific to their departments. For most of our departments, the only thing you're going to need is the MPIO, a WMIS certificate, which you can do online.
And what is the WMA? Can you describe
WMIS?
that?
So WMIS is,
WMIS?
oh man, what does that stand for? It's a
Workplace
safety materials.
hazardous.
Oh, Megan knows she's workplace hazardous materials safety data sheet.
Yeah,
No, there's no D in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's essentially a system for tracking, labeling hazardous materials that are used. It could be paint, it could be cleaning supplies, it could be hydraulics in the trucks that are being used. Anything that is potentially harmful to the environment or people. And there's a specific program. There it is. It's a got it. We're giving out points. So it's a specific, you have a binder in the office, and you have a binder on any place where the materials are stored, and it's a way of having quick reference on how to do cleanups, or ensure that the materials are safely stored, ensure what they, be aware of what not to mix them with.
The symbols.
Oh, excellent.
So you learn
Something's
this.
radioactive.
right.
You'll see those on the backs of trucks too, but that's all part of the WMIS program.
Right.
So everybody
right.
in film needs to do that. It's an important thing.
Yeah.
That probably covers it.
Yeah.
There's
So,
lots
go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's so many different things. Like, I am probably the only department that needs a firearms license. So like, if it's you would click on union pages, and there's very specific things for different departments. It might just be one little thing, like the WMIS, the MPIO, that like drags on all of those, because that's very basic. But yeah, when you get in depth with departments, there might be a few specialized courses you might have to take.
Yeah, grips need lift tickets. Grips and electrics need the high lift tickets, especially if they're doing rigging.
Right.
There's all kinds of specialty stuff, like people who work in water safety crews. There's a whole bunch of marine certificates that they generally have. People who run drones have to have a whole pile of aerial stuff. So in short, though, if you're coming into the industry, it's always good to start kind of with the basics, to have that stuff down. And you can always look at the various unions' websites for specific departments, and it's clearly laid out what you need to become a member of permittees. It's less so in the kind of indie world, where a lot of people get their footing too. Like some of those non-union Hallmark movies, there's a ton of that work in Vancouver. You can kind of get yourself in on Facebook. They're a little bit less strict about, although hopefully that's changing, a little less strict about qualifications and stuff, just because they really need to hire people in there. And it's a really also can be a very good training ground. That's another way to go about it. And then you can learn there too what you do need to move forward.
Right.
The bigger stuff. Yeah.
Definitely. Like when I was even in the IATSE world, and then moving on to ACFC and being able to go into the art department there, I got to touch base into set deck and into the behind the scenes, like, on the computer, making the graphic design side of things, and everything in the art department I got to see, versus my friends that might work on bigger shows in IATSE having the same position as me. Their workload and stuff is there's just a larger crew.
Yeah.
So I find in the ACFC world, when you work on those smaller shows, you get to touch base on so many other things. You get so much more experience. I get to create props and make props, whereas someone else in a props truck position would never get to touch that. Like, they don't have the authority, but it's the trust, and that's, it's my crew, and you sort of become part of it.
Yeah. And there's pros and cons, like, to any, you work in a large company versus a smaller company, and what opportunities look like. And just all this to say is that there's a lot of different ways that you can think about it as you're entering the industry and approaching it. Megan, you talked about if you don't know Megan, if you haven't watched her TikTok, it's pretty cool what she's doing in that props truck. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and some of the videos that you've shared? It's I don't know, it's hugely entertaining and educational.
Yeah, the first video actually that popped off was a video of the grips, and the show had aired, and I was, I didn't want to post anything. I was nervous, and then I was talking to one of the directors, and I said, I have a video that I posted, and it actually took off. It was just them waving screens in front of lights. So it's like a car's going by, but we're inside of a building. You would never think of things like that. And people loved it. And the director was like, why didn't you tag me? He's like, what do you mean you post? Like, he's like, I love it. Like, he loved it. So I got more comfortable with that and talking to my higher ups about it and stuff. And it just took off. I think I made one about aging some wood or aging, some papers and stuff. And yeah, it just took off. I decided to keep doing it. My on-set person, Dante, sort of helped me like take some videos and stuff. I get a lot of questions about how to get into the film industry, big time. But usually I just I take my phone out when I'm doing the craft side of things, whether it's I'm mixing a drink or whatever, bringing out a specialized prop or like making whatever, filling out a book or.
There's mashed potatoes involved, I would say.
Yes, I actually.
So
I have that. Yeah, like cakes, making potatoes in the truck or making silicone cakes and fruits. I have boxes of nuts that I'm gluing onto stuff to make look like food. And so I just show people that, and people loved it. I had no idea people loved it until I
think there's a lot of interest in the movie magic, right? Like there's still we're also a huge visual effects and animation industry here in BC, and the if you ever go to like a Marvel film or something, you will see thousands of names who contributed to the visual effects, and there's a reason for that. So I think even some of the work you're doing is really interesting, I found. Jeff, in your time over the last few years, have you seen sort of a shift in what kind of roles are more in demand, or what even how work has shifted for folks, especially over the we know the intense time period and commitment that the film industry has had to COVID protocols as well.
Yeah, that COVID unto itself has almost created an entire department, a hygiene department, which is about testing and making sure things are clean. And there's been expansion in some departments like first aid, craft service, and catering, just because there's a little bit more of a workload to ensure that protocols are being met to keep everybody safe. We see right now a higher need for grips and electrics. Is a department that is quite large and has a pretty big footprint, and it is in the terms of hiring just individuals, it's very broad. You can have a day where you need 3 people, and then the next day you're going to need 20. So we find that that's one of the departments when it's busy, where there's lots of room for entry. There's a little bit of skill, that's required. So there's good courses that you can take. A great way into that, is approaching the rental houses for work. You kind of get a really good grounding on what all the gear is and how it goes together. And
so that would be rental houses are like
William F. White. Yeah. There was one, it's just changed its name and I forget what it's called, but if you look up film equipment rental, there's a number of places that do it in Vancouver area. And same thing with kind of set deck. There's set deck and or props. There's a lot of set deck rental houses where you meet the people coming in and out, and you kind of get how to handle stuff. It's a lot of sometimes antique furniture or in the case of props, weird little things, just how to catalog it and make sure it's tracked. Film company will rent a lot of the stuff that you see on screen, and it's a lot of work to track it properly, take care of it properly, how to clean it. So you can learn all those things and get a leg up, as well as meet people by working for those rental houses. Costume rental, same thing. If you're interested in getting into costumes, a costume rental house is a really good way to start to get some of the basic experience as to you know, how you handle it, because they do the things the same in a rental house as they do on set.
Yeah.
Just there's
That's-
a little more, it's a little more involved by the time you get
Yeah.
actually to a set.
I think that's really interesting. You know, food for thought for people out there is, you know, what you learn if you are interested in being, you know, a DOP, a director of photography, that actually working in a rental facility is probably quite, you gain a whole other set of knowledge maybe you didn't learn in film school or somewhere else. So yeah, that's really interesting. So Megan, you entered, you said, through sort of your network of friends, and that seems to be how a lot of people end up working in the film industry. And part of, again, Creative Pathways is trying to help people who don't know friends who work in the industry enter the industry. So you said you get asked a lot from people.
Yes.
What do you tell them?
I've actually been waiting for this. I have been waiting to just be like Creative BC. But I started sending out the links and stuff too, because I have message requests and stuff. And then I just started sending the links to people, which they were happy about that. BC PAX on Facebook. I always tell people to join that because I've had friends post on there. I've posted on there. There's always things. If you're available that day, it's called being an ASAP, and you can get in, and that can be your foot in the door, just like that. That's what I was out. I had one day, and then I was a full time, pretty much, like for some people. Yeah, I forgot what I was.
You're talking about what you tell people, and your, I guess also, what's your experience when you showed up on your first day? What was it like?
Yeah, so I was gonna relate to the renting place. So I'll go into the rental houses too. Sure. And like that's just another side of my job in the truck. Like I'll be taking like lists of all those things, and it's very meticulous as to what's going in and out of those shops, and we're very involved with that. But getting into, sorry, what was the question?
What was it like when you your first day on set?
Yes. Okay. My first day, I have a video of myself a week in, and I said, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm part of the crew. Someone brought me a cheeseburger. This is so fun. So I think it took me a week probably to start like actually talking to people and realizing I kind of think there's like a common sense in the industry. Mm-hmm. And if you it's either you can get on that common sense or you can't. And it's like, if you want it, you can get there. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge part of it, is wanting it. Because like, if I didn't like pulling stuff out of the mud for 13 hours, but I know that I wanted a creative job. I wanted to be able to do stuff, and like, because the ladder's always there. There's opportunities around every corner, and it's whether you want it or not. Mm-hmm. And if you can understand the hierarchy, and like you see a job and you're like, I want to do that job. You could magically get on the job, but like you really have to prove to those people that you want it, that you're sensible, that you're highly aware of everything going on around you. That's like the awareness, self-awareness, and other people, actors, the way you talk to people, the way you're treating people. I don't know how else to really learn that other than going onto set. Film students and people that graduate school and they want to do this specific job or this specific job. It's very, very tough to just, because you have that knowledge that you can do that job. I think there's a lot to learn with even your body mannerism, walking around set. It's a set etiquette. Like I sometimes lose it when I go to the truck for too long. Like I'm in the truck for a week building something, and I come to set and I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Like, where's my set etiquette? Like, so I think there was a huge growth for that when I first started. I was nervous, but I was ready. I was so sick of what I was doing before. I was so ready. Yeah.
Yeah, the culture is interesting because it is a very unique workplace when you're working on set. It isn't like working, in an office or even some other, like a creative job that's in a studio or, it's like a animation studio is also very different. Jeff, what have you seen in terms of, generationally through culture shift and, trying to adapt also to people who might be more, introverted or wanting to learn, but don't necessarily, approach, bring a different type of perspective and diversity to their approach, and how do we help those people and the people currently working in the industry kind of come together?
That's a big question. I will say in my time, I've seen a massive shift. Anecdotally, when I first started film, it was very common and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here because this is a practice that doesn't happen anymore. But on Friday night, when the wrap was called, the producers would wheel out 2 giant garbage cans full of beer, and everyone would sit around and drink and then drive home. And it was common practice.
Right.
And there's a ton of little things like that have been incrementally changing over time, which I think is for the best. It was, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not first generation film, second generation. My son's doing stuff in film as well. So it's, you know, we hear all the stories, and it was the Wild West, and now it's kind of, there's a lot more people being conscientious about people's safety and a better work environment. So to that end, it's changed immensely. I will also say there's a lot more diversity over the years that have come in. Way more women. I mean, that's the first thing I'll notice, just without making any generalizations, but so much more women in the time since I started till now, which I think is great because it makes much more balanced workplace, and it's wide open. There's room now for everybody. I think Hollywood's leading the charge with trying to do more diverse productions, and it only makes for a healthier, more robust industry on a whole. And I think as crews start to mirror that representation, it takes time. And this is a great thing for people to get in there. It's going to make a very good. It's going to be a very good change in the industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, to answer that question, I've seen massive change for the better. It's still, you know, I think there's always going to be a long ways to go. We learned things. COVID was a massive undertaking by the BC film industry. You know, when it all first happened, I was part of it. I know Prem, you were part of it. There was Zooms that happened every second day, it seems, with upwards of 150 people on them, from everybody from like the head of CBS to crew members, all coming together to try and create a cohesive plan to kind of make us all move forward together. I don't know that could have or would have happened even 5 years ago. So it's definitely a very interesting time to be in the business, and it's really good that things are moving forward like that on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, I think that cohesion that you're talking about, you know, when 2 years ago in March 2020, none of us knew what the end looked like, or what, like,
we all thought we'd be shut down for 2 weeks and then just go back.
Exactly. Or like, just go home for 2 weeks. And I know there were sets that were just sort of left knowing that we don't have to lock that up because, you know, we'll be back in 2 weeks. And obviously, you know, it kind of went on for about six months. And, you know, I think certainly from what I saw, and, you know, our film commission team here was really involved in helping develop those protocols, was just you know, took time, but that coming together and really showing, I think, leadership jurisdictionally for, you know, other places in North America. I think we're also fortunate in Canada and BC, just at that time, what the COVID rates were looking like. There was no vaccination, like there was all kinds of unknowns still. And yet, you know, I think by the late fall into the winter, many shows had come back or new productions were landing. But it was, so much learning, I think, from so many perspectives. Jeff, before I forget, I want to give you a moment to speak to Call Time Mental Health, because you talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah, so I'm very pleased to be on the board for Call Time Mental Health. It's right now we have a website, and actually we're about to do a big relaunch, so it's going to get bigger. It's essentially the 6 unions have come together, and this is another great thing that's come out of, you know, the recent years, is the unions are very much all on the same page and working together to help improve the situation on the floor, you know, selflessly. It's kind of nice, which wasn't always the case in the past in Vancouver. So, and this is one of the initiatives that's come out of it. So essentially the unions fund it. There's a couple of people, or one person from each union, who sits on the board. We've engaged one of the FSEAP companies, which works for, I think, 669 and 891, which is part of their plan. It's basically a counseling house. So it's really about mental health as well as drug abuse and addiction problems. So it's a place that people can go if you're looking to help someone or you want to help yourself. There's a great resource. There's a lot of learning and education things that you can do on the website. So, you know, film is often can be a very stressful environment to work in. They'll do very, very long hours. That takes a toll on health and especially mental health. There are a variety of characters who seem to continue to work in our business, and that's not the easiest thing for everybody to put up with, you know. So I think by recognizing it and offering support and education for people, that's also a really good part of what's happening in the industry to open it up for, you know, like for example, you said different people coming in, somebody who might be a bit of an introvert. It's really an extrovert's business, you know, like you got to be kind of out there. That being said, there's tons of room for everybody. You know, we work with a gentleman who's neuro non-typical. He's I believe his diagnosis is Asperger's, but he's on the autism spectrum. He's a very successful in the AD department in the DGC. His path has been one of communication and like trying to let his team know. He has a difficulty reading people's expressions and translating what they're thinking, right? So if someone's joking around about something, he sometimes has difficulty separating the sarcasm from the from like a real fact.
Yeah.
So a huge part of his thing, and he's been really good at it, is learning how to communicate to his team members and say, look, here's my limitations, here's what I'm good at. And I think that there is, in recent years, a lot more room for that in film, which is a great thing. So I would suggest anybody getting in, if you know, you do, it's not a bad thing to have a bit of a thick skin. But if you're sensitive and you're like, you know, there is places for you. You know, there's a great, like set deck, for example, is a really cool. This is the department I worked a fair bit in, and you can. They're kind of an isolated department. They're in ahead of stuff. There's lots of little jobs that you can do, or just like fun artsy little projects, and it's great. And you don't have to be with a whole ton of people all the time. And so there is, you can find those places within the industry to fit what your personality is like. And I think there's a lot more opening for that too these days.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of adapting and openness that is starting to happen. And it's a long, I always say it's a long game, right? Like things are not going to transform in some cases necessarily overnight, but I do like what you said, that there is room. There's room for everybody. Like it's an extremely robust industry.
Yeah, like just to finish quickly that story about this, I forget his name. It was about a year ago that we all met him, but he is so good at his job because of what, I mean, you don't even want to say disability. It's a difference, right? It's a difference in the way his brain works and thinks. Like we all are. We all have differences. Some of us are more artistic. Some of us are more logical. There's room for all of that. But he is able to really, really, really excel in his specific thing that he does because of his differences, which is great.
I love that. I just want to like relate the impact of like the industry changing and stuff. It has a lot to do with our new industry workers and everyone coming in being strong with what, like obviously you have to know what's right and what's wrong, but being strong with what actually is right and wrong in the film industry. Like even 2 years in, I'm being tried to get paid less, or like I show up to work, or we're hiring someone and they don't want to pay them that day. Maybe we'll pay them the full day 2 days from now if they can come in, half days. And I have to I put my foot down and I just say, nope, that's not right. Like we can get in trouble. They're coming onto set. Like, I think that's a huge part of making a change here, is like actually people putting their foot down. I know there's strikes going on and stuff like that, but I think there is like, it can improve. And as long as we just keep like standing to what is like morally right and what's fair to our group, and about the not disability, but like I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I found my job on the truck is like I can flourish when they're like, what are the little details about this and this? Can you find this? I'm like, like I know everything in every box, and I have everything like labeled. I'm like an organizer sort of on the side of that. Yeah. And there's room for everyone to flourish. Like I've people that, oh my goodness, so many aspects. My person that I work so close with, we are so different, but we suit our positions so well. It's like, it's really cool.
Yeah. And I think what you're both saying is that, that aspect of personal responsibility, and for your community of people, whether it's, whatever environment that you're in, that you know, you are there to back people up and support them. And I think that you know, films can't get made without that. You know, I haven't been in production in many, many years, and worked mostly in, you know, television studio productions, but very, you know, you need every person kind of really wanting to be there, part of it, and feeling everybody feels supported in what they're doing. We have a good question here, actually. How would Megan and Jeff recommend, with a lot of non-film experience? As an example, I have 10 years of graphic design and creative experience, pivot into film. Is it still recommended to take day jobs or to get experience on set? Do you want to start, Jeff? Or anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can. So that's an art department specific kind of skill set, which is very transferable because the art department generally isn't working on set. You know, the chain of command would be, there's somebody called the production designer who works in conjunction with an art director, and they then split off into set deck props. The art department, which is more responsible for specific graphics and stuff like that happen. So it's a very similar job to working in film to just working as a graphic artist. There's very, very little difference, except for maybe time restraints and the length of day that you're doing. You know, there's a couple of different paths that I suggest everybody take. I mean, the first one is Facebook and volunteerism, where you just put yourself out there and put some time in. So if you're into graphics, watch Facebook, watch for independent productions. You know, I love to make short films, and I do it with friends, and it's always the case where when you're doing a short film, you'll have a group of people who are everywhere from somebody who's like maybe holding a boom, who really wants to get some experience and working for free just to kind of learn and break in, to, you know, like my buddy who's a DOP who's really seasoned and experienced, who will come and volunteer and shoot my little short films for whatever, for fun, right, on a weekend. And there's probably 50 of those a month that happen in BC, because there's so many film people and we all like to do our own thing. You do, you know, you're in film, you have a love of film, you're not just like, I just want to make Warner Brothers TV shows. We all want to do our own thing and be our
there's so many stories to tell.
One really, really good avenue for, and I'm not just art department, but any department, is just say, look, here I am. This is what my experience is. Oh, look, there's a great thing about the art department. I'd like to help out if I can, you know. So having someone in there with kind of access to those skill sets is great. The other thing you could do, like for example, with our union, so one of our requirements is 30 paid days in the industry to get into the art department. So this is more of a long shot, because the other thing about it is the art department specifically is not a large number of people on a given set. You might have, you know, unless you're starting in set deck and to meet kind of those higher ups to move your way over to the art department, that's another good way. But if you're just trying to get straight into the art department there through a union, or it's going to be more difficult just because there's a smaller footprint of your actual job. You know, if you're a graphic designer, for example. So you can contact our office and say, look, here's where I'm at. I'd like to start an application. I know I don't have the full requirements. Then what can happen with us is if we get lists that are going out to productions and it gets really busy, which it's not right now, and we exhaust our membership list, we like to know that there's people out there that have experience that we can suggest to go in. So super, it's rare that that's going to happen, but that is one way. The other way is, if you want to get into the art department, kind of go laterally. Like props is, there's less people, but set deck is a really good one, because you'll understand, you do work closely with the art department. You won't be doing art, but you'll be like putting the art up, and you'll see where the art's made, and you'll meet the people who are doing it. And then you can say, hey, you know, if you guys are stuck, I can do this, this, and this too. Like Megan mentioned earlier, on our smaller shows, we have a lot more crossover between departments. So, you know, like if you're working on a Hallmark show, for example, there might be 3 people in the set deck department. If you're working on Batwoman, there will be 12.
Just this depends on the scale of the production.
So scale wise, when there's more people, on those bigger shows, they
Mhm.
tend to do just set deck. There's no
There's less crossover.
But
Right.
when you have a smaller crew, everybody kind of helps each other out, and you learn a little
Mhm,
bit
mhm,
about,
mhm.
set deck and props work more closely together.
Mhm.
At art department and set deck and props, same kind of thing. There's a lot more crossover and
Mhm.
chances to
Mhm.
get in.
Yeah. So Megan, I feel like you have probably a lot of experience on this, and I
Yeah. So I would say, when I talked a lot to set deck, it was when I was being a prep PA. And I found that was like a lot of time, even on the bigger shows, once they trusted me, because we were at that West Van house on Firefly Lane for months on end. And I was with that crew every day. They're in there changing the house, boxing stuff up. And they said, Megan, do you want to label the boxes? So I'm already, like, I know, like, I gained their trust, like I can label the boxes. It's different when I moved to the ACFC world, like you said, and the crews are smaller, like, and that, I think that was a huge learning curve, like realizing like what we could do in these smaller shows that they can't do on those big shows. And like, I think it's super important to go do that first. And I know I did the PA route, and I did that. I find it's probably the easiest department to get into because you don't need your courses. You could have a very easy day. You could have a day that you hate, but that's what they want to see, is that if you want it, you'll come back, you know? And then, yeah, doing the prep work, I got to talk to a lot of other departments. Pretty much I got to see everything. Being a PA, I got to see everything. And even just, I know the departments or positions that you might want to do aren't on set, but being on set, you can give your number and tell people, hey, like, this is the deal, this is what I do, would you mind passing your name along to my team? Would you mind, like, I wrote food designer or something, like, he makes plates, I put his name and number and I just put it in the truck, like, there's little things like that where one day I might need like this little special thing, or like I get messages on Instagram, I'm a graphic designer, I do this, is how do I get into film, or can I work with you? And I just say, unfortunately, my team is all like set up, but the fact that I still have that message and one day it pops up, I actually know a graphic designer, I don't know, but it's just, the communicating is huge. And I think just getting into film is probably more important than getting into your specific thing. Like, there's so much room for crossover and growth. Like, it's not, you got to think a bit wider, not just, I want to do graphic designing, because I was doing art, whatever, props track, and then I got offered, I got asked to do a costume design job. I saw someone say, what about costumes? And I think it was unpaid, very little pay. And it was a big job, and I couldn't do it because I was traveling. But if I took that job, put my time and effort, sewed, and I made a costume for this commercial, that is huge on my resume. I could and it would, it's volunteer work. And I didn't, if I wanted to do it, I would have done it. And I could have pushed myself to get into costumes or push myself to do that. But I like props, and that's what I wanted to do. So that's,
I think it's really what both of you are saying is really that, that production assistant entry point. You don't know if you're going to end up, like you said, digging through the mud, or what department you may end up supporting, but it really starts to give you a good, view of the landscape of the possibilities, and building that community of people. Again, this is a highly networked industry. It's really starting to, even with your fellow PAs, they might be making their short films on the weekends. And there's a couple of questions about costume departments. And I think the way you, Jeff, have described it, that it's the same kind of entry point for most of the departments, right? The way you described the art department would be very similar to costumes. I really thought it was interesting about the costume houses that are the suppliers for the industry. These are the film adjacent jobs we don't always realize that are a huge part of the industry as well. There was one other really interesting, well, all the questions are interesting, but where was it? Somebody wanted to talk about independent productions and how you get into it. I can speak a little bit to this, but I'd love to know how both of you have approached this. I always like to remind people that it's really, if you support somebody's project, they're likely to support yours. And if you went to film school, or BCIT or Cap College, or you're even working in the industry, and you may hear, like I said, that you're, the AD on the show is, doing a side indie project. And if there's an opportunity to help them, because it will come back to you. And, there's competitions like Crazy Eights, which is, if you're not familiar with it, maybe Kat can post the link in there. There is in the past been something called the MPA, the Motion Picture Industry Association Short Film Award. It was always held at Whistler, and it's a pitching contest. And what happens with those projects is that Crazy Eights is amazing because they have to make a film in 8 days. And then there's a screening. So many filmmakers have participated in that. So many different types of opportunities and crews that work on, I mean, that's what we're so fortunate here is that there was a few years ago, the MPA short, I think it was the MPA short film winner. She was a stunt person in film. And she pitched and she won the prize, and then she made her film. And of course, you know, there were some amazing stunts and special effects because people she worked with came to support her project, and it probably leveled it up to a way that nobody expected. You know, is that what you found, Megan? Have you helped people out on their indie projects over the years or done your own?
I actually haven't, to be honest. I mean, I've helped out with people and like done little things, but I haven't done my own. I, you know, didn't go to film school. So I don't have that sort of surrounding, but I do like thinking my roommate has definitely taken some positions. I don't know how she got into this little world of these smaller films, but she started just as a production assistant. They needed a PA. And at the end of the film, she was the production coordinator. So like you can go, and now she can do that. She was a production coordinator on the short film, or, you know, so like those are, it's super important. And yes, all my friends are working on the weekends. Like especially going to ACFC World, the crews are a bit younger. It was more comforting going onto that set. I found that, you know, I think it's a good foot in the door, the ACFC World. And yeah, IATSE was it's just a bit more, you know, it's larger. It's going to be more rules, lesser, your role is your role.
Yeah, they're pretty large productions. Jeff, do those dates that if you're working on a short film over the weekend, do those days count towards days for membership?
Oh, yeah. Our official rule is it's paid days. So we don't care if you're getting paid $5. You know, if you want to show that, if you want to negotiate that when you say, you know, I'm looking for paid days, so give me a toonie and we'll call it even, and then I can put it on my resume. You know, so there's ways to make it work. Where we try to be a little bit more flexible, we definitely look, you know, we can't give anybody. The nature of unions are they're kind of, everybody has to be on a level field, right? There can't be any fair things given. But I will say, for example, we will recognize there's a course from the North Island College that they do, which is an introduction to film. It's a very intensive, you know, it's for right now the 3 departments they're doing are grips and electrics and construction, where the people pick their category. They do the course. They all work together for a weekend. Martini Film Studios has been hosting them. I think the last time I saw you was at that graduation.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
Yeah.
So at ACFC, we looked at the curriculum. We looked at what people actually come out of that course with, and our council decided that they would recognize that as an equivalent to 30 paid days in the business, even though I think it's like a 5-day course maybe. But because it's so intensive and because they get a chance to work with every piece of equipment, every new piece of equipment, there's rental houses that are involved in supply. We look at it as an equivalency. So there's chances for anybody to plead their case. You know, if we were talking earlier about the art department thing, and if you've got 10 years in graphic design, let us know when you talk to John, who's in charge of our membership packages that go to council, who ultimately decide it. You can always say, hey, look, this is what I have been doing for 10 years, and I have the MPIO and my witness, and I'd like you to consider that for. They can say no, they can say yes, but there's no harm in trying. I think harder with IA, in my experience, a little bit more difficult to break into that union. They're certainly bigger and a little more strict, but you can try there too. Everything's worth asking. Yeah.
And people are, in my understanding, often members of both. So there's a lot of fluidity. Like I think both of you are members of both or have been. So you know,
not member, but permittees.
Permittees, yes.
That's
but so there's you know, there can be some back and forth, and you know, I think there's sort of so many like benefits to the different types of scale
Mhm.
of productions, from that short film on the weekend or Crazy Eights to, you know, the scale of, you know, Sonic the Hedgehog or something.
Yeah.
That would be very different. Would be very different.
I find that people might get what's frustrating is do you have the experience? So when you do want those jobs and when you do talk to those people and say, I have the, you know, the graphic design, I have this experience, I have this experience, they're going to say, okay, what about a film set? Do you know the times, the different, you know, the people that you're dealing with, how things have to suit, whatever, like the art side of it, and just about film. It's very different. I think people relate it to, there's not really nothing like it. Like, it's like art army, like it's like the art army. That's what we do.
It's very militaristic in some ways.
Yeah.
It's also the biggest group of freaks and weirdos you never hope you encounter on any given day.
I guess
which
it's
is
sort
the
of
best
like,
part of it.
it's sort of like, you
Yeah.
know, time is money. So there's like, if you don't get this done, then, you know, the actor's showing up in 2 days, and if that's not ready, you can't do it, right? So this is part of, I guess, it's a very technical industry behind the scenes that people don't necessarily, because what we see on the screen is so like magical and completed and, and beautiful.
So you just want to get, you want to get as much experience as you can. Like whether it's you're not unpaid, whether it's this, that, like you always use your voice, and they're going to know, and it shows if you have the skill and if it's true, and you're like, I've done this, I have this, like pretty much a resume. When you're trying to get a production assistant job, I hand out some numbers. These are some close friends and I trust that they're good workers. It says, hi there, I have a car, I'm a hard worker, I'm this, I have 3 days on the show, I got this, and you just talk yourself up, like, and then show them like that you want it, and show them that you're good at it. Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
There's this funny old expression that I've heard a number of times going back a few years, but it's that the most exciting day you'll ever have in film is the day before your first day on a film set. it's because you know, like one of the toughest things to master in film is sitting around for 6 hours doing absolutely nothing, but being able to switch on when you're asked.
Yeah.
Not to bug the person that's going to ask you, just to have trust in your supervisor, and like know that they all know that you're doing nothing. It's totally cool. It's worth it to pay you those dollars so that you're sitting there ready to jump in when it has to happen. And I've literally had days where it's the whole day. It's 14 hours of waiting, and things keep changing, and you're like, I'm gonna go, and then nothing happens, and it's okay. And it's one of the hardest things to, you know, you got to be ready to jump. Sometimes it's incredibly stressful, and you got to keep it cool, and you just got to put your nose down and get your thing done. All the eyeballs on you, but the real hard part is between those moments when you're waiting and you have to remain sharp and ready to go.
That's like the set etiquette. The set etiquette and the common sense aspect is where you really got to master that, and then it'll come a bit easier for sure.
We've just got about 5 minutes left, but Megan, can you talk a little bit about, because I'm fascinated by the things that you show in your TikTok videos, things that maybe you learned or surprised you, not, you know, being, you know, you now seem like a very experienced props person, but when you first got there, like just, you know, some of the tricks of the trade that were unexpected. Or were you a crafter before this? Because
I always like to craft. I make jewelry. I like dry out mushrooms and dry out a bunch of stuff, and I make makeshift like earthly earrings and stuff. So I've been into that forever. So I really found my spot there.
Makes a lot of sense.
So just I'm going through. I think the food really surprised me. There was a lot of food. A lot of real food that doesn't get eaten and gets thrown away. That was pretty surprising. Realizing how I'm just trying to think. Okay,
well, so on the food part, let me talk about Real Green for a moment. So Real Green is an initiative that works out of Creative BC, and it's about sustainability in the industry. And what's happened on many productions because of that, the waste that you're speaking about, particularly food, is that there's now refrigeration set up and proper ways to be able to get it to food banks or shelters or places that could use the food. Part of the challenge before that was that You know, there's all kinds of food safe rules that you can't just, if something's been sitting out for X number of hours, go
Yes.
off at a shelter. So there's a lot of activity. I also encourage people to check out Real Green. It's the Creative BC website, and that's another course actually you can take is the Real Green course is free, because it's also learning about how much, particularly in the work that you probably do, Megan, like there's so much material that, because we live in BC, there's a lot of, we have a high sustainability EQ here. So there's places that can take different types of waste and products. It's just a matter of the time to do that.
Yeah, so I've had to sort of cut some corners there when I'm like, if I have a bunch of peppers and if I have a bunch of food, I actually lay it out and I just say, I don't know what this is. And then they can take it if they want. It's not up to me. I'm not giving food away, but I really, really try to do my best to take as much home, give as much to my friends and family when it's, when it's not touched and eaten. But things that surprised me was, how meticulous it is, and like little details and continuity and things. Like my job isn't just, okay, like here's the stuff or organize this. It's like, I have to have a relationship with the director, a relationship with the actors, feel comfortable going in and giving them their things, feel comfortable walking in, being the last person to walk in to the set before they say rolling, because one little thing is wrong, or they're gonna, if you have made a mistake, before they say we're rolling, run in there and fix it, because that whole shot is going to be ruined because that continuity wasn't right. So little things like that, you learn so much. There's way more than you would ever expect. And I think learning about the hierarchy and actually having a relationship on set was much different than being a PA. That was really cool.
Well, thank you. And thank you both. I think there's a lot of really interesting background and things for people to think about if they're looking to get into the industry or working within the industry. We really appreciate your time. We could probably talk for another half hour. I know Kat has a little survey link that she wants to do. We'd really, if you wouldn't mind, she'll put it up in a second. We really want to know who's joining these sessions, so that when we're planning future sessions, we can better plan for them. Is it going up, Kat, the survey?
I'm just going to launch it right now, and then I can also show links to ACFC, Megan Props, TikTok as well, or post survey. Wouldn't mind just filling that out. That'd be great. And also signing up for our Creative Pathways website, newsletter there, if you'd like to be informed of any future events too. So I'll just give everybody maybe 30 seconds really quickly here, and then I'll just show the rest of our slides. So I won't close the poll for at least another 30 seconds, but.
Hey, so I just was going to quickly, Daniela asked about costumes department, just super fast, so we don't leave a loose end, because I hate that. Same thing, rental houses, Daniela, get to those. Same thing, give us a call. And if you've had an experience, another good thing is community theater, volunteer there. It's interesting because we'll look at theater in some cases as a film day, depending on what you're doing, but there's all kinds of different ways to go about that. But rental houses for sure, Vancouver Proper Costume is a huge one. I know they probably have a lot of turnover there, get your name in there. And then the other thing is the DG film list, and this is for everybody. Look at the indie films, the smaller ones. Send a resume to the production office. Do it once a week. Say, here's what I'm interested in costumes. Here's my experience. If you guys need a hand for a day, I'm available. I got a car.
Yes.
Be persistent and keep going after what you want, and it will happen fairly quickly.
Final word to you, Megan. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, opportunity is always, oh my gosh, I just got caught off guard.
Opportunities, how to find those opportunities. And
it's whether you want, honestly, I totally forgot what I was going to say. I had a very specific point there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for you shared a lot of knowledge. So, don't feel bad at all. Kat, you're going to put up the QR code for how you can stay connected to Creative Pathways.
Yeah, so just before I do that, just a shout out, of course, to Megan. Sorry, there's a lot of echo. I'm just had also career from the background. So, we also have the ACFC. If you'd like to scan that too and get more information about joining that union.
Great.
We have our newsletter sign up here. Leave that on for another 5 seconds or so. and our post-event survey. You can access our website at creativepathwayscanada.com.
Okay, I think I might
Okay, go ahead. Megan.
remember some things. I always say to people, if they reach out, I just say, I'm like, you know what, thanks for your messages. This is the first step. Like, I always let people know, like you know, like you did the first step, you reached out. And that's just like what you got to do. Yeah, opportunity is around the corner. It's there. And I just want to tell people, like, I was a PA, I think, and I got a resume sent directly to me from a production, like to a studio, and it said my name, and you can go on the DGC list. Yes, that's what it was, the DGC list. And you can see all the productions happening in Vancouver. You click on them, you can see who the locations manager is. And you can send, if you can just say, hey, I want to do PA, whatever it is. Like I'm open to do, you just talk yourself up, give your resume, say your experience, send resumes and do it weekly. Jeff wasn't lying. Like, even when you have a phone number and you're texting them and say, hey, I'm available next week, they're not going to remember. You're going to text them the next Sunday and say, hey, remember, I'm available this week. And then the next day you're going to be like, hey, I'm available Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Be persistent. It's like, it's really there. It's like the fact that you need to find it. The DGC production list is huge. I think that's a good one. And then you could look at the IATSE departments, things that you need, the application forms, and then same with ACFC. I think that's a huge thing to know, like those links are good.
Excellent. Thank you for adding that in. So thank
I
you
totally
all.
blank.
No, I totally get it. We're over our time. So thank you if you shared your lunch with us today. And we look forward to seeing you again. And Kat, maybe we'll do a resume making session, because that's probably quite important. So anyways, thanks again. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.